Well, unfortunately, it's a renewed gun debate in the wake of more deadly shootings, unfortunately. Is the answer to take away a guaranteed right or make sure everyone can defend themselves? Well, let's debate it. Joining us now, Democratic strategist Christina Haley, as well as with us co-host of the Loud Majority, Shawn Farash. Welcome to you both. Okay, so Christina, I'll go to you first on this. In the wake of every shooting, there's this renewed push to ban the tool, but not address the failures of the system or the reason it happened. Why do you think this is?
I don't know if there's not a urgency to address the reasons that it happens. I think sometimes we get lost in the reasons, and we have to understand that every situation obviously is unique. And I don't think it's a debate to ban the entire tool. I think there's a lot of steps that can be taken before we even address taking away anybody's constitutional right, which I 100% believe in. But there are steps that can be done, whether it's assault weapons, background checks, etc. And things like background checks and other tools that can be used actually do address the initial problems, whether it is mental health. And there are certain people that maybe shouldn't have a tool in their possession that can take the lives of other people within seconds.
Shawn, we know that the majority of gun violence is perpetuated by people that are possessing guns illegally, more than 90%. We also know that with the Walmart shooting and the other all these shootings that we hear about, the mass shootings, there were these massive warning signs, right? So why is there always this focus on the mass shootings? Obviously, it's news, but we should also be focusing on the gang shootings and the possession of those guns that are obtained illegally. And again, more than 90% of those guns that are used in gun violence across America are obtained illegally. So once again, the Democrats are using this as a talking point, I feel like.
Yeah. It's very easy for the Democrats to point at a boogeyman or someone who's, big bad Republicans and say, look, they cherish the Second Amendment, so therefore they cherish everybody having guns. It's not that they cherish everybody having guns. It's that they cherish everybody having the right to defend themselves with a gun. My biggest problem with the gun debate right now is when we hear about assault weapons ban, I am still yet to hear the definition of what an assault weapon is. Is an assault weapon an AK-47? Is an assault weapon a musket that was used in the Revolutionary War? I don't know. I have no idea what they mean when they say assault weapon. Is an assault weapon a baseball bat? Is an assault weapon something that destroys a liberal narrative? I don't know exactly what it is. So until we start moving forward with an actual set and agreed upon definition of what an assault weapon is, I can't sit there and get behind any sort of assault weapons ban because I'm not too sure they know exactly what they're banning. Illegal guns is a very important thing to talk about. It's illegal guns. A lot of people we see that are going to be affected by some of these bans are legal gun owners. We've seen it happen in New York, exactly. We've seen it happen in New York, and what Kathy Hochul tried to do, and what was just struck down by the Supreme Court not too long ago, back in June. Yeah. We need to focus on.
And then
giving people their rights.
The gun-free zones, right? In Times Square, you have the sign there in the middle of New York City, gun-free zone. Right. Do you think the criminal will see the sign and be like, oh, gotta put my gun away, can't use it?
Christina, I want to go back to your earlier point. You said you support the Constitution, but you said you support, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said you support maybe an AR-15 ban. You don't think that the AR-15 is protected by the Constitution?
I don't think I specifically said AR-15 or anything to that degree.
Or assault weapon.
To the gentleman's, to the gentleman's earlier point, I think assault weapon has been defined, and it was actually a bipartisan definition that was come up with a certain number, and I don't recall off the top of my head. Happy to come back with the exact number, but it's the amount of magazines that can be, or the amount of ammo that can be dispersed within a certain period of time. And I do believe, I don't think it says it anywhere clearly. I also believe in the Constitution where it's the right to life as well. And I'm not sure that we've come to a point where the kind of blur of the right to life and the right to owning a gun or having a gun to defend yourself, which again, 100% believe in.
Christina, if you're going to go right to life, now do abortion. If you're going to go right to life, now do abortion.
What? I'm sorry.
If you're going to say the Constitution has,
or what's this topic going to?
Well, so if you're going to say that the Constitution has a right to life, let's look at it the same vein. But I think also in the common definition, I happen to be quite a gun guy myself.
The point of a definition, right? The definition of when life begins. If we're going to go into the abortion thing, and if we're going to say that the life begins as an embryo, then why doesn't that carry into the gun debate?
So I'm not sure how you're conflating the two issues. If you have a right to life, I also have the right to defend myself. Shawn, we got about a minute left. You know, background checks are used for every legal gun purchase. I've purchased many guns, all with a background check. Why is this still a talking point that we need background checks?
I'm not too sure why we're making that talking point. Maybe they believe in the gun show loophole, which has pretty much been something that's been debunked over the course of time. But when we look at a background check, look, I don't want crazy people to own high-powered weapons.
Agreed.
But it's very difficult for a crazy person, right, to go out there and buy what would be called a high-powered weapon. I like to focus on this specifically. When we look at illegal weapons, we look at gun bans across the country. I think one of you just mentioned it. If you see a gun-free zone, if there's a criminal out there who is hell-bent on causing a mass shooting in some sort of highly populated area or a sporting event or a Walmart or something like that, they're not going to look at that and say, oh my goodness, the weapon that I'm about to use is illegal, therefore I can't commit the crime. That person is getting ready to commit the most egregious crime in the world, which would be taking somebody's life. We just spoke about the right to life. If you're ready to kill somebody, I don't think you care that what you're ready to use to kill them is illegal, because killing the person in and of itself is illegal.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. Christina, Haley, I wish we had more time. Shawn, Farash, we should actually do this probably every weekend. This is good. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
No crooked establishment.
None of that twisting the truth.
No talking down to me.
Don't tell me how to think.
Don't tell me how to think.
Don't tell me how to think.
I trust Newsmax.
Newsmax.
They don't tell me how to think.
They let
me decide.
Newsmax.
real news
For real people.